Hey, it's Freitag. In this podcast, we interview business owners in New Hampshire and beyond to get their perspective on work, growth, and of course, the weekend. Join our host, Freitag marketing owner Jan Ziegler, as he interviews fascinating guests. We hope you'll enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Freitag. I'm Jan, and today I'm joined by the Vice President of Marketing at Franklin Pierce University, Mark DiPietro. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Jan.
Thank you so much for joining me. We met a while ago. I think it was a Leadership Monadic event. And before we kind of dive into how to market higher education, how did you end up where you are now at Franklin Pierce? Give me sort of a bit of backstory.
Yeah, so a little bit of a winding story for me. I didn't start out with the intention of going into either higher education or marketing. I started as a journalism major at Northeastern University. And actually before that, I was an English major and then I was a poli-sci major. So I was kind of all over the place in my interests. Thought about maybe law school or something like that, but ended up in journalism. When I got my degree, I got a job in Newport, New Hampshire at a little newspaper called the Argus Champion, which unfortunately no longer is in existence. But that's what got me to New Hampshire. I grew up in the north of Boston and moved to New Hampshire. Thought I'd stay here for a little while and go back to Massachusetts. Ended up staying here. I've been here for over 30 years. From my newspaper work, which I did for about 8 or 9 years, I ended up with a public relations job at a firm in Keene called Guerin Associates, which works, it's still in existence, works exclusively with colleges and universities to promote them. So that was sort of how I dipped my toe in. It's related to journalism. You need good communication and writing skills, but it was a little more focused on the publicity and marketing side of things. And then I did that for 13 years and then went to Landmark College in Putney, Vermont, as the director of marketing communications. And that's when I really sort of got thrown into the higher ed fire and figuring out, how to market things in the digital age, how to market a college specifically. And I was at Landmark for 11 years. And then last September, I went over to Franklin Pierce University in the same role, Vice President for Marketing and Communications.
Cool. And so before we let's talk about PR. Your PR clients in sort of higher ed, and were they local, or was this is this nationwide clients and you got to see all over the place, kind of doing the PR?
Yeah, it's the latter. We worked with universities all over the place. So and it was a range of publics, privates, and so I got to travel. I got to see different parts of the country and work with a really wide variety. Schools, some, Research One universities, worked with Louisiana State, which was really cool. And then some smaller ones, private ones that were more regional, but yeah.
So, but that's the perfect preparation, right? For okay, and now we have this local, Landmark is not a huge college, but you saw national colleges doing PR and marketing and communications, and then you brought it back. So what are, I have to say, I know nothing about how to market higher ed. I know a lot about marketing, but not higher ed. I didn't even go to college in the US, so I really have no clue how it even works. How do you market it? Because, the first thing that I see is you have a ton of stakeholders. You have, you need to do fundraising, you need to you need to get people to enroll. You have parents, you have kids, so many audiences. How do you do it?
That's the $1 million question. How do you do? And I think the answer has changed over the decades since I started doing it. And it's also dependent on the institution and the type of institution's needs that you are trying to achieve. But you're right. It's all those stakeholders. You have to reach prospective students who want to enroll. You have to reach their parents because they are the ones paying for it usually. You have to reach alumni because they are your supporters and your boosters. And then you have to reach this whole other level of donors who are your major gift givers. So back in the day when I started at the PR firm, it was primarily through media coverage. That was a big deal. I think there was a lot of education coverage happening at the time. So the key was to find what makes this institution unique or specific, what maybe is a niche that they have in a research area, and then, build that story pitch, go out to New York Times or USA Today or wherever and get that coverage for them. And that was a big booster. The old types of advertising would have been fairly old school, and right around the time I went to Landmark, things had shifted to the digital and social media sphere. So that was a really critical time to start figuring that out. I think a lot of people were still figuring it out then. How do you do digital advertising without, seeming to, I think a sensitivity in higher education is that sometimes marketing cheapens what they do. There's sort of a loftiness, and it is important what's done, but at the same time, you have to let people know what you do and why it's important.
Because you want to give people the sense of exclusivity, because obviously it is not guaranteed that if you apply, you enroll. You want to make it it's kind of hard to get into, but also we need you to apply, right? It's like basically both messaging. You need to hit that tone, because you can't just be like, yeah, we'll take anybody, because then you have the brand that you devalue. And you can, on the flip side, make it so exclusive that nobody feels it's like Harvard. It's like, I'm not smart enough.
That's exactly right. Yeah. If you're, if you appear desperate, it's just like talking about yourself to other people. You don't want to appear that you need to be liked and so you want to portray the really great qualities that are going to be a good fit for students. And at the same time, not appear to be in the elite league of a Harvard, which doesn't need to do it much publicity.
The brand carries the entire thing, right? And so at Landmark, how did you do that? What was, that was really I think now obviously you've done it at Landmark, you Franklin Pierce, it's different, but it's more of the same. But how at Landmark did you first think, especially on the advent of digital for colleges, what did you do? Worked? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. We did a lot of experimenting, which is really what marketing is. It's not a science. It's throwing a lot of stuff out there and then seeing what works, which I guess is how science works too. But so at Landmark, we really weren't in the digital sphere at all. There was a lot of broadcast advertising, a lot of radio advertising, which was effective. Even now, I believe they're still doing radio advertising because that tends to reach parents. And the parent audience at Landmark was really important because for anyone who doesn't know about Landmark, it's a college for students with learning disabilities. So it has a niche, which in one way makes it easier to market, but in another way, it makes it hard to convince students that they need it. It's not the place that all their friends are going to. It's in Vermont, so if you live somewhere else, that can be a hard sell. So we really had to start figuring out who our audiences were, who was hanging out in those different digital spaces. Facebook at the time, Facebook is still a player in the digital sphere, but at the time it was the big player. So we really had to start building out Facebook ad campaigns, figuring out how to integrate that with our broadcast messaging. Learned a lot when I was, coming up at that time about how you do things like SEO for your website, making sure you're driving people there organically if they're looking for a place, and then merging all of that together. And then looking at, the really important part is looking at your analytics. So what worked, what turned into an application or a conversion, as we call it. In the stuff that's not working, you start to move away from and you start putting more behind the things that seem to be working.
But at Landmark, it was easier because mostly it was parents that probably because the students had these specific needs, they weren't so much shopping themselves. It was more the parents probably shopping for the students. And so it was more that audience, right? I would assume you didn't have to being cool wasn't so important. And now you're at Franklin Pierce, and we'll talk about this in a second more, is now you need both, really, probably.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The other thing I didn't mention about Landmark, when I joined, it was transitioning from a 2-year college to a 4-year. There hadn't been bachelor degrees previously. So it had really been a transitional place. And it was a place where your parents would say, I think you need, student might have been at Syracuse University or somewhere else, and they were hitting a wall academically. And their parents would say, look, there's this place called Landmark College. You need to go there for a year.
You're not going to like it, but yeah.
Right. And so many of our alums at Landmark would say, I hated it. My parents dragged me here. And then once I got here, I realized this was the place and that this
Because
is
it's
what I
like
needed.
it's like saying you're not quite cutting it where you are, you need more help, which no 18, 19, 20-year-old likes to hear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've
Or 32-year-old.
yeah, well, that's right. Nobody likes to hear that, right? And there's been for students with learning disabilities, there's been so much stigma in school and everywhere else. So, but as we were transitioning to a 4-year, then it became even more important to portray all the typical qualities of a college campus. So, the student life and the activities and even athletics, even though it's club sports and intramurals at Landmark, you still had to portray that if you want to play college sports, you can come here and you can do that. So the parent audience was really vital there. And I think even now I'm finding even at a mainstream university that it's important too, because they're the ones opening the checkbook.
And probably also they're the ones that more critically question the kids' choices, right? They're like, well, I think this one's cool. And they're like, well, but is it actually doing what you think it's doing?
Right on.
So Franklin Pierce, you went there with President Eden, new president, kind of like in conjunction. I mean, I would assume you guys kind of decided together to like take this on. I mean, just like it seemed, be like, okay, like we did Landmark, now we're gonna do this. What excited you about Franklin Pierce?
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit. So Peter took the job. He was hired in May of 2024 and started there in July. So obviously I knew he was leaving, but it wasn't a joint decision. He got there and found that there actually was no one in my role. The marketing function had been rolled into enrollment and admissions, which is really hard to do. That's a big lesson, I think, for colleges and universities is they're separate things. There's the sales piece and there's the, the admissions, the marketing
Yeah, marketing
piece.
And sales manager, you need both. Yeah,
Exactly. So he got there and said, we need to reinstate this leader in the marketing division. So he called me and, said, I'm going to be posting a job. And if you're interested, then, you can apply. And that's what happened. So, and we'd had a great run at Landmark. We worked together really well for 11 years. And we sort of jumped into it. I went there in September. And we had started talking before that and like laying out, these are the challenges. Some of the challenges are similar to what Landmark faced. Some are different just because of the kind of institution it is. But we recognized that we had to try to replicate that success we had at Landmark.
So in like the 30-second elevator pitch version, what's the brand of Franklin Pierce?
Yeah, excellent question. So that was one of the first things we tackled. And looking at what makes it distinctive, what makes it, what would make students want to come
because,
here.
I mean, we're in Keene here and we have Keene State. And like, I feel like Franklin Pierce is a bit like the lost stepchild that we have there somewhere in the woods in Ringe. Like if you drive to Massachusetts, you kind of like pass it, but not really because it's invisible. Like it's not Keene State on Main Street, right? Like what is Franklin Pierce?
You just articulated the exact challenge. That's it. We can get lost because we're not visible. So the brand pillars that we have really narrowed in on is it's a small, safe, rural community, and safety is really important, I think, to this generation and to this generation of parents as well. If you have been to the campus, I know you have, but for people who haven't, you should just come out and visit and look at it because it's gorgeous. It's on a pond and it's, we've got hiking trails and you can see Mount Monadnock and it's sort of contained. It's a very collegial place. It's a small student body. It's only about 1,000 students. So it's not, big party atmosphere of some of the other bigger campuses. Brand pillar number 2 is we're an athletics powerhouse, a Division II athletics powerhouse. We have really strong sports programs. And adjacent to that, our academic programs really support careers in sports-related fields such as communications, sports broadcasting, management, things like that. And PT, physical therapy, is a huge. We have a health sciences program that leads to physical therapy doctorate. And pillar number 3 related to that is careers. Career paths at Pierce was previously called Paths at Pierce, and we added the careers because that's so important to everyone right now. Everyone's looking at ROI, and that's one of the first things parents want to know. What are you going to major in? What is that going to lead to? Are you going to have a secure and hopefully lucrative career after this? So when I met you, Jan, you had come for a leadership summit, and you heard President Eden and I talking about the fact that we're really building up relationships with businesses regionally. We've always had good internship and career path opportunities for our students, but we're really focusing that now to try to build out the relationships that will lead to solid internship opportunities, even guaranteed internship opportunities for our students at local companies, as well as bigger companies elsewhere where they could maybe do online internships. So I think safe and supportive Division II athletics and career outcomes are a big identity.
Okay. And so is that a unique value proposition in the world of universities? Like, I don't know. Like, because it seems like you're like, okay, if you are passionate about sports, but you're probably not going to make pro in anything because you're not that good. You're like, you're good, but not that good. But you want to stick around the sports field in a career way that is not you're the athlete, but you're in the ecosystem. We're the place for you. Is that maybe the niche, or one of the niches anyways?
Yeah, you nailed that, because our athletes really are recruited by coaches. And so, a student who maybe sees us online or sees one of our ads and says, hey, I want to go play, Division II football, it's probably not going to happen because those students are being recruited by the coaches. But if you want to be in the middle of that environment where there's, sort of the team, rah, let's go Ravens, and you want to get into a field that is related to sports, that's a really big deal for us.
Yeah, and you have this, like, we went to tour it, and I thought it was really impressive. It's like the whole media and communications school. I forgot the name, to be honest, but like, it's really cool. Like, it's an amazing facility. You have like full-on production, studios, much better podcast studio than I have here, and like you can do a TV broadcast. Like, I thought that was like the coolest thing about like Franklin Pierce that we got to see was like, oh, this is like you can do serious media here.
Yeah, that's our Fitzwater, our Marlin Fitzwater Center, and you're absolutely right. It's as overused, but it is state of the art. It's just a great place for students to cut their teeth. We have what we call the Raven Sports Network, where student interns can do broadcasting, but they can also learn live streaming and podcasting and all of that. And it's a great studio to be in. Whether or not you want to go into sports broadcasting, it's just a great place to learn all of those basics that are going to take you pretty far in the field. But we do have students who then we have a graduate from this past May who's actually doing broadcasting for the Keene Swamp Bats this summer because he did a communications major.
That's really cool. And so you and President Eden, you've been there now for not quite a year. I mean he has, but you haven't. I would assume you have a vision laid out now on like what needs to happen for like with all these, like to get that brand out there and to like increase enrollment and all these things. What is sort of like your 1 year, 3 year, 5-year plan on like Franklin Pierce, especially in the community?
Yeah, it's sort of multi-pronged. One thing I didn't mention, you did mention earlier, fundraising and how important that is. So we have a new VP for fundraising who started the same time as I did. And with President Eden, she launched a $7 million campaign, which is vitally important to everything that we want to do because it's going to help us build out both corporate relationships and, paid internships and things like that, as well as our campus facilities, just making them nicer, building up some of our sports facilities. So that's a short/long-term plan. The other piece is supporting the marketing function, which again, because in higher ed, often that's sort of pushed aside. There wasn't enough attention paid to it, I think, in the past. So we're trying to rebuild our capacity to be able to do that. And that means, a bigger budget for marketing, being able to do more advertising, and also just the relationship building.
Yeah. And I would assume that there's now, especially like with so much federal funding getting cut in education nationwide, like, or just funding in general, like there's probably quadruple the pressure on advertising because everybody's trying to like show their ads to the same audiences, and we all know it's auctions, like, right? So it must get way more expensive right now to get an application than it was 3 years ago or 2 years ago or last year even.
Absolutely. Yeah. The competition's tougher. The demographics are lesser than they have been ever. And the cost of everything has gone up too. So the cost of advertising, if you're doing print pieces, which are weirdly like back in style now, because I think people are so glutted with emails that mailing a print piece can be really effective, but all those costs have also gone up.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I think it's really interesting that like right now, like direct mail, I think is actually not a bad idea. Because like all of a sudden, like because I would assume that if you're like a graduating high school student, you see a gazillion ads from universities all over the country trying to like get you somehow, and it's really hard to stand out. But like not that many people mail, right? Like, and so like I for our clients, even I was like, I wonder if we should try this. Like, see how that works. It's like, let's go back, because I think the digital used to be really cheap, and it used to be really, like, it is really trackable. It's still really trackable, but it's not cheap anymore. It's really expensive. So it's interesting that you see that too. And especially because I would assume parents are the ones opening the mailers, and like, they're probably like, oh, interesting. Like, who are those?
Yeah. And I think about my own behavior as a consumer, and I pay attention to what's in my mailbox because, except in election season, when it's too much stuff. But, I read those things that come from businesses, and I have a son who's 20. He's working full time, but he will still sometimes get solicitations from colleges and universities. And we always look at them because they're right in front of you. It's not an email that you can just delete or pay no attention to.
Well, and I think it's like, if I think about my own mailbox, like, I don't, like, as soon as it's like a credit card offer, like, I disregard those. But it's like a local business sending me a piece of mail. I'm like, oh, interesting. Oh, in marketing, so I'm susceptible to looking at these things, but like,
that's right.
I'm like, oh, that's unusual. It doesn't happen that often. And I think, I'm sure in the city it's different because they get a lot more probably direct mail, but we just don't. And I think it's like underpriced attention right now, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I listened about a month ago to a podcast interview with a college, or rather, I think he was a high school senior, and his dad, and they were in the college search. And the student said that his emails, whenever he gets an email from a college, he assumes it was written by AI, and that they all say the same thing and they all sound the same. And the stuff that stands out for him is when he gets a piece of mail or he gets an email that is really actually seems like it knows who he is and it is unique in the way that it's written. So that's the challenge for all of us. I think we all fall into like marketing ease and using certain words, and it's hard to break out of that, but I think it's more important than ever to do.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think like if I see one more time the call to action is like call for a free quote. I don't know anybody in the world who charges for a quote. I mean maybe somebody does, but like a free quote is just a quote. And I'm like, this is not a good call to action. And I think it is true. It's like so many things look the exact same. And apart from like, having more money being able to do more things, how do you, like, you have the major problem is like, right, there's less children. Like there's less young adults going to college, and it will be less and less and less over the next. Is that something where a university like Franklin Pierce says, okay, we are preparing to like downsize, like we will just like realistically we will not be, unless we outperform in marketing everybody else, we will realistically not be bigger in 15 years than we are now? Or is it like you're like, no, we're going to fight this battle, we're just going to do so much better, and therefore we will be bigger in 15 years than we are now?
Great question. 2 points on that. One crucial thing that I forgot to mention is, in addition to our undergrad programs in Ringe, we have 4 graduate centers. 2 are in New Hampshire, one's in Manchester, one's in Lebanon. And then we have one in Arizona and one in Texas.
How did that happen?
So that happened because leadership saw needs for particular types of graduate programs, physical therapy, physician assistant, in areas that didn't have a glut of those offerings. So the Arizona Center, I should know this. I don't know exactly how long it's been there, but it's been quite some time. The Texas Center is in Round Rock, which is near Austin. That just opened last year. And that has one of our graduate physician assistant programs. So Franklin Pierce in Ringe, New Hampshire, at some point was like, yeah, there's not enough graduate programs in Arizona for PTs. Let's open one. That's wild. Yeah. Yeah, that's like an entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah, it's like, opportunity here like has probably just nothing to do with us. Nobody knows us down there, but we're going to make it so. That's cool.
Yeah, that's what I love about working with Peter Eden is that he wasn't responsible for opening those, but at Landmark, we did many of those same initiatives. We opened what we called a success center in the Bay Area of California, because we realized we had a lot of students who would come to Landmark from California, and there were no offerings for students very few offerings for students with learning disabilities, not like on the East Coast or in New England. And he saw that need, and he was like, we need to do this. We need to start it, because it's bringing students there, but it's also publicity and marketing for us in California. And that's the same sort of thing with our graduate centers at Franklin Pierce. So circling back to the question you asked no, that's okay.
Don't get excited. Like the sidebars happen all the time here.
Yeah, but that raises the really important thing that I think higher education needs to be more entrepreneurial in those ways, and some really are. And I think Franklin Pierce under President Eden is trying to do that. So our graduate programs are a big part of the strategy. Growing those tend to be more revenue generating than undergrad programs are. So that's part of the answer. The other part is what he likes to use a phrase that he calls right sizing rather than downsizing, which is, maybe we don't grow, but maybe we stabilize and stay where we are. So I think that's a real goal for us, is that we don't have to grow back to what we were pre-COVID, which was, I think, more like 1,500 or 1,700 students. But we do have to, stabilize the ship and right size the place.
Yeah, I mean, of course, because you do probably like to justify a VP of marketing and so on, like you need a certain size to like keep all of the functions that you need to like be sustainable. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Cool. So that was a lot. And super, super interesting. Now I'm all fascinated. But so at the end of the podcast, typically we kind of switch gears a little bit and we talk about like, well, what does Mark do on a weekend? Like it's Freitag, Fridays, like what does a good weekend look like for you?
Yeah. So, boy, I wasn't ready for that one. Love the outdoors. I love New Hampshire, this part of New Hampshire especially, because, Keene is a nice little city where you have what you need, but then like you're 2 minutes from mountains and trails and all that stuff. So I like to hike. I like physical activity in general. So I like to work out. I'm involved with my church, so that's a weekend thing. What else? I sometimes am working on Franklin Pierce projects on the weekend.
Yeah.
But recreationally, I just love to be active, and I'm involved with a theater group here in Keene called the Edge Ensemble. So we were right in this building on Marlborough Street. So
you act there. You said you're on the board. You act there. You're in the plays.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know when this airs, but we do have a show opening June 20th that I'm in. So, yeah. So
awesome. No, that's cool. We'll probably air this before then. So please, everybody go to the Edge Ensemble. What's your favorite spot? Like, where do you like to go? It can be a restaurant, bar. It can be a spot outdoors. Where you're like, oh, I love being here.
Yeah. There's a lot of outdoors places there. I like to sometimes just walk around Goose Pond because it's just so pretty over there. I like to hike. I'm forgetting the name of it. I think it's the Colony Trail, but it's right off of Route 9, and it's not a super challenging trail, but it's just a really nice spot to go and be in the woods. I spend a lot of time at the Keene Y, so that's one of my favorite spots. And let's see, for hangout spaces, I don't hang out a whole lot in restaurants or anything like that, but I was just at 21, and that's a really nice renovated space there.
It is to make that real pretty. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. Really appreciate you coming into town all the way from Ridge, New Hampshire. No, thank you. And obviously, if people have any questions, they can find you on the Franklin Pierce website, I'm sure, and reach out. But thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you for asking me, Jan.
Well, that was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world. Our episodes drop every Friday, so stay tuned for more insightful chats from It's Freitag.